Josh, come this way.
Thank you. All right. Something was not right. You see, I was supposed to be meeting a friend for lunch, and I got to the restaurant, was sitting in the booth, and all of a sudden, something just didn't feel right. And the good news is I got there about 15 minutes early. The bad news is by the time I got back from the bathroom, he was there at the booth, and he looked at me, and immediately he knew that there was something wrong. And so I left the restaurant, told him I'm sorry, we're going to have to take a rain check. Called my wife immediately, and she is my rock, and she's the one who's calm, cool, and collected in these moments. Me, I lose it. And so I was in the process of losing it. And what I didn't share was the bloody details of why I was losing it. But the decision that we made is that we would meet at the ER. And so I was driving there to meet her, got there before she did. And not that I wanted to spend a whole lot of time at the ER, but we were in and out in like 2 hours. And so to be in the situation I was in, and for them to basically do the scans, blood work, and say, oh, you're fine, go home, I was like, yeah, this doesn't seem right. And the pessimist in me was like, this can't be right. But we went home, and I felt okay that night, slept well, got up the next morning, and things took a turn for the worse. But before we get there, this came March 28th of this year is when this happened. So it hasn't been that long, 2024. And so I had not too long before this had a birthday, and I am in the process of being right in the middle of a midlife crisis. And so there's a lot going on. And so this was just another thing to kind of add to the pile of being almost 50 and questioning a lot of things about life and trying to figure out what I'm going to do and having, being in a situation where I feel like I should have more answers right now than I do questions, but finding myself completely disoriented, and then I end up in the hospital. And so this was a difficult time, and at the same time, I started thinking to myself, okay, I've got to get out of this funk. What can I do to get out of the funk of being in a midlife crisis? And I know a lot of people in the situation would buy a sports car, take an exotic vacation, climb Mount Everest, maybe have an affair. But none of these things were options for me at the time. And so what I decided to do was to finally follow up on my doctor's recommendations and to have that colonoscopy I had been putting off. And so that is why I ended up in the hospital, because of this colonoscopy that I finally had. And not just once did I end up in the ER, but twice, because got home Thursday, slept well, got up Friday, and by Friday afternoon, things were drastically worse. And so by the time I got to the hospital Friday afternoon, I had lost enough blood where I was going to need to have a transfusion. And so got in the hospital, I had IVs in both arms, I had everything taped to my chest, which I have a hairy chest, and so every time they removed them, it was fantastic. And so I'm in the bed, and when I'm not wrestling with all these cords because I'm up and down to the toilet because I'm prepping for another colonoscopy because they've got to go in and stop this bleeding, it was a nightmare. It was one of the worst experiences. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And so Sunday came, and they finally fixed me, and I just could not wait to be home with my family, to be in my own bed, to get some rest. And so I was so relieved to get home and to get a good night's sleep Sunday night. And then Monday I had my follow-up appointment. The doctor said, this is going to be a long recovery. It's going to be 6 to 8 weeks before you even feel strong again because you've lost so much blood. And my hemoglobin was cut in half. So she's like, it's going to take time to build that back up. And in that process, I was at my desk one day doing some work, trying to get caught back up. And out of nowhere, just started crying. It was like all of a sudden it just hit me. And I was like, what is happening? Because I wasn't even thinking about the experience or anything. I was literally just doing work. And so I went and talked to my wife, kind of worked through some things. And she reminded me, she said, this has not just been a physical experience. This has been a heavy and emotional, a weighty thing that's happened. And so, don't be too hard on yourself. This is going to take some time to work through these things. And so that's what I did. I bought some books, started walking as my energy came back, started listening to podcasts, and I read some books about dealing with grief and regret and trying to find ways to find more joy in your life and the simple things. And in that whole process, I came back across the Moth podcast. And I started listening to stories, and I kid you not, this past summer, my oldest daughter, who's here tonight, came with me, and we've been coming on a regular basis now. I'm gotten to know a lot of you. And it's just been such a fantastic experience for me, and it has been a reset in a lot of ways because the book I read that impacted me most while I was recovering was a book called Inciting Joy by Ross Gay. And in that book, he says, in addition to the fact that we will all die, the most salient and unifying thing about us as people is that we cannot survive alone. And so as I started coming to these things and hearing all these stories, it helped me to process a lot of things. And to hear other stories, it is such a cathartic and healing experience. And so I just want to say, if you're new here, if you've been coming, it's a great place to be. And we heal best when we heal together. So thank you.